Hey there, my friends. Derek from Bomb Socks here with more Bomb Bites, feasting upon the words of Christ, one bite at a time. So yesterday I brought up the word that strikes fear into the hearts of every member of the church, Isaiah, right? Because when you read Isaiah, you get confused. But one of the things I want you to remember about Isaiah is that God will keep his covenants with members of the House of Israel. As they do what they are supposed to do, he will most definitely do what he is supposed to do. So one of the things that I want to make sure we understand is the words covenant and the words Israel, which I brought up Israel last time, as President Nelson calls it, let God prevail, which you're going to see that happen in this very chapter. The word covenant is really concentrated right here in chapter 20. In fact, if you look up the word covenant on your Gospel Library app, you will find it most concentrated right here in this chapter, 3 Nephi chapter 20. So as you go over to 3 Nephi chapter 20, you're going to see what a covenant means to God. Now, in order to also understand that, you've got to understand a little bit of the history of Israel, okay? So I am going to teach you the history of the House of Israel in 3 minutes or less. Do you dare me? I will. I'll totally do it. I don't know how well I'll do it, but I'll give you a quick little rundown of just the history of Israel. So starting right now. So you got this guy by the name of Abraham, okay? Abraham, father of many nations. Abraham, God makes a covenant with Abraham that all of the families of the earth will be blessed. It includes land. It includes posterity that will number the sands of the sea. So Abraham has a son by the name of Isaac. Isaac has a son by the name of Jacob. Jacob has his name changed to Israel and has 12 sons. If you want to go through all their names, you can go watch Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. You got all those names, okay? So with regards to Israel, here is the land, okay? The land of Israel here. Now what happens is midway through the Old Testament, the land gets basically divided in half, and you've got what is called the northern kingdom, and you've got the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom has 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom has 2 tribes. Those 2 tribes are Judah and Benjamin, okay? And the Lord has promised them, look, if you will do what you're supposed to do, I'm going to bless you. Problem is, you've got all of the idolatry and all of the other things that sneak in. I don't want to say sneak in. Israel brought them in. So you got Israel and Judah all brought into there. And what ends up happening is God is a wonderful object lesson teacher. He loves his children. And so what he does is he allows, and I'm not saying he caused them, but he allows them to be scattered. So in 721, you have got the Assyrians, a huge military power, come in and they take out the 10 tribes, okay? They are scattered all over the world. And then in 586 BC, Judah is carried captive into Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. And with that in mind also, shortly before that, you have got a prophet named Lehi who was telling all of the people in Jerusalem, down here in the southern kingdom, look, Jerusalem is being wicked and it's going to be destroyed. If you will not repent, that same thing is going to happen to you. And so what ends up happening is Lehi and his family become scattered Israel, in the sense that the Lord brought them out of Jerusalem, and they become scattered Israel as well. And then later on, after the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, about 70 AD, the Jews are scattered out among the Gentiles, which is why Paul the Apostle was commanded to go out there and gather Israel. So that's a quick little, I know that was kind of a drink from the fire hose, which we talked about last week, but that's a little bit of an idea of Israel being scattered, and now they are being gathered in. Many of you know of people who are out there gathering Israel, right? Many of you have children out there gathering Israel. Many of you yourselves have gathered Israel, or you're awaiting a mission call to go out and gather Israel. Now, with all of that in mind, I know that was a quick 3 minutes, right? With all of that in mind, I want to show you the promises that are given in chapters 20 and 21 that the Lord gives to his children. I do want you to search for the word covenant, okay? Look for the word covenant. And also, I want to show you what God is going to do. So also search for the words I will. Okay, you can start this right about verse number 10 of chapter 20 and just kind of skim through there. Look for the word covenant and look for the word I will and see what the Lord is willing to do to help bring his children back in who are of the house of Israel. So when you read it that way, all of a sudden these chapters really, at least for me, these chapters have come to life to show you how the God, again, of universes without number, really brings in his focus to the house of Israel and how he will bless them. For example, you look at verse number 29. He says, I will remember the covenant which I have made with my people. I have covenanted with them that I would gather them together in mine own due time, and I would give unto them again the land of their fathers for their inheritance, which is the land of Jerusalem, which is a promised land unto them forever, saith the Father. And then you actually see Jesus quoting Isaiah 52, as a matter of fact. You go into about verse number 33 or so. It says, the Father will gather them together again. Verse 34, they shall break forth into joy. Sing together, ye waste places of Jerusalem, for the Father hath comforted his people. He hath redeemed Jerusalem. And then verse 42, I love how it says, the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel shall be your rearward. Meaning he's going to go before you and he's go behind you. Now, in chapter 21, if you go to verse number 4, he says, for it is wisdom in the Father that they should be established in this land and be set up as a free people by the power of the Father, that these things might come forth from them unto a remnant of your seed, that the covenant of the Father may be fulfilled, which he hath covenanted with his people, O house of Israel. Elder Holland wrote a book a few years ago. It is called Christ and the New Covenant. And it is particularly referring to the Book of Mormon, how this particular book, in chapter 21, verse 9, it talks about how for my sake, the Father will work a work which shall be a great and marvelous work. And so that marvelous work is the Book of Mormon. And so the idea of this covenant, one of the things that is going to bring in Israel is going to be the Book of Mormon. And you cannot gather Israel without the Book of Mormon. I want to show you a cool little video that actually explains that pretty well. I'm trying not to go over 10 minutes here. There's a lot of stuff we're following in. I may sneak out of that today. But there's a cool little video I want to show you. It's from actually a gentleman by the name of Chad Webb. So Chad is the head administrator over all of seminaries and institutes, which basically makes him my boss, my seminary boss. He shared something a few years ago that I thought was wonderful with regards to our efforts to be able to bring in Israel and gather them in. How the Lord has asked us as members of the house of Israel to continue to gather Israel. So watch this.
One other example of this part of the covenant. I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to be in Southern California, and I went to an evening institute class. As the class was starting, the teacher invited the students to share what they had done that week. It was the last class of the semester. They were all in college. They were on a college campus, and they were finishing up the semester at this university. And this young lady said, I'd like to share what's happened to me just a couple of days ago. She said, this semester I enrolled in a speech class. I didn't want to do that, but I had to have it in order to graduate. So I decided to make this a meaningful experience. I was going to speak about some aspect of the church every time I was given an assignment to speak. So pretty soon the members of the speech class learned that when she was going to give us a speech, they were going to learn about the LDS Church. And so each time people would ask her questions, and each time she would get to teach the gospel. And at the end of this semester, which had happened again just 2 days before this institute class, she said she was assigned to give a persuasive speech. And so she had prepared to give a persuasive speech to encourage the people in this class to each read the Book of Mormon. As part of her preparations to teach why the Book of Mormon and to encourage them to plead with them, in her words, to read the Book of Mormon, she had been taking careful notes of all of the interests and concerns and problems of each member of the class while they gave their speeches. She then went and purchased a copy of the Book of Mormon for each of the 28 members of the class and the teacher, had their names embossed on the personalized copy of the Book of Mormon. On the inside cover, she wrote her testimony and wrote about one of the things they were interested in or concerned about, and a reference in the Book of Mormon that would help them learn more about that or answer their question. She then passed out the copy of the Book of Mormon to everyone, and she taught them why they needed to read the Book of Mormon. She said, this talk went better than I ever imagined. It was going so well, and I finished and I felt good, and then it was time for questions, and a lot of hands went up. She said there was a young man who kind of gave her a hard time after her talks, and his hand went up first, and she thought, well, am I going to do this or not? And she called on him first. She had only been baptized a couple of years, and they knew that, and he said, why in the world would you join that church? She said she took a deep breath, looked him in the eye, and said, because I absolutely know that this is the only true church on the face of the earth. And all the hands went down. So she said, would you please read the Book of Mormon? I've included my email there. I want to hear what you think when you're done reading it. And she said again, 2 days later, she had heard from 2 of the students that said, thank you, I've begun to read the Book of Mormon. And then she got an email from the teacher that said, in all my years of teaching speech, I have never been persuaded to do anything by listening to persuasive speeches. But I promise you that not only I will read the Book of Mormon, but my wife has agreed to read the Book of Mormon. We will both read it and let you know what we think. Our young people are just incredible. They understand this covenant to make God's name known in all the world.
I love that story. So again, in these chapters, if you'll go through and see what the Lord covenants with his children, what he will do and what the blessings will be. One of these, last one right here is in 21, where it says, then shall the power of heaven come down among them, and I will also be in their midst. And so that's the thing. When you and I will keep the commandments and keep our end of the bargain with this covenant, the Lord will also fulfill his end as well. Anyway, I hope that helps you out a little bit. That was a lot of stuff. But these chapters, if you can understand just simply, God will keep his covenants with the house of Israel as we do our part. If you can keep that in mind, you will understand Isaiah, and this whole week will make sense to you. So tomorrow, we're going to get to one of my favorite concepts with regards to Jesus Christ, and also one of my favorite titles that you'll get to see. So anyway, you guys have an amazing day, and we'll see you tomorrow. Godspeed. Bye-bye.